Selecting individual columns. In the previous lesson, we saw how to select all data using the select star statement. But in our queries, we don't always want to see all the columns in the table. This can be fine if there's only a few columns like our example, but if we have a table with 20 or 30 columns, then showing all columns is not necessary in most cases. So what can we do? We can select only one column by changing the select star to select the column name. For example, if we just want to see a list of the first names in this table, we would replace the star character or the asterisk character with the name of the column. In this case, it says select first name from customer. If we run this query, we can see the first names here. We still see the same 3 rows and the value of John shown twice because there are 2 records for John. In a later lesson, we'll show you how to delete the data, but for now, selecting just the column name will show you just that column in the result set. Now, if you're looking at this query, you might be able to see red lines underneath the table name and the column name. I mentioned this briefly before, but this happens because we've recently created the table. The feature that shows these red lines is called IntelliSense, and it uses this caching feature, which means that the definitions are not updated yet. To remove these red lines, you can press Ctrl-Shift-R, or you can go to Edit, IntelliSense, then Refresh Local Cache. After a moment, the application is updated, and then the red lines should disappear. They disappear because the table and the columns exist. If the red lines still appear, this means that there is a typo or an error in the name or the spelling of the table or the column does not exist. So this should make it a bit easier for us to read. So back to our query. We've selected a single column. What if we wanted to select 2 columns? We can do so by adding a comma after our column name, and then adding in a second column here. We can run this query and see our results at the bottom. It shows the first name and the last name column, but not the order credit column because we haven't mentioned it in our select query here. You can see I've put the 2 column names on the same line here. This is up to you. You could readjust your query to put the last name on the next line, or even the first name as well. You might see some examples online that have a query structure like this. You can run the query like this, and it does the same thing. For now, I'll leave them on the same line here, but this is up to you. Finally, let's add in the order credit column. We do this in the same way, and you can see the order credit column is shown at the end here. The columns are displayed in the same order that you specify them in the select statement. If you want to show the last name on the left, so before the first name, you can remove that from your query and specify it first in the list of columns. When you run the query, you can see the results and see that the last name is first, then the first name, then the order credit. So what's the difference between specifying all of the columns like this instead of select star? It does take more typing, but it's recommended to do it this way. You get to define the order that the columns are shown instead of select star, which defines the order in the way that they were defined on the table and is subject to change. You also get to specify which columns you want to show. This means if the table changes by removing or adding columns, the query and the things that depend on it might break if you use select star. If you specify the individual columns, it's more robust, and there's a less chance that other things will break. Select star is good if you just want to have a quick look at the data in the table. But in all scripts or all code that you write, I would suggest using the individual columns like we have here.